Xenobiology 101, Welcome to Earth. Professor Corax adjusted the third lens of his primary eye and stared out at the sea of eager young faces filling the tiered seats of Lecture Hall at 23. The beginning of another semester at Galactic University always brought a strange mix of anticipation and dread. He'd taught this course, Xenobiology 101, hostile environments and their life forms, for over 30 galactic cycles, and while the technology had evolved, the students had not. Every term, without fail, some overconfident warrior-class student would challenge the curriculum's treatment of Earth, claiming the data was exaggerated, the risks overblown, the biological danger overstated. Every term, one of them would learn the hard way. Corax tapped on the console embedded in his lectern. The room dimmed, and a holographic image of a deep blue planet flickered into view above him, slowly rotating. A label hovered over it, Sol 3, designation. Earth Class 13 Death World. He let the image hang in silence for a moment. As expected, the usual murmurs began rippling through the hall, chittering, low-clicking sounds. The flutter of wings from students who hadn't yet evolved a sense of discretion. Right on schedule. He cleared his throat, his voice cords humming through his vocal sacs in a low but authoritative tone. Today, he began, we begin our unit on Class 13 Death Worlds, and we will be focusing on one particular specimen, Sol 3, more commonly known as Earth. A voice cut through the murmur, tinged with smugness. My father says Earth is just a primitive backwater. They haven't even colonized their own star system yet. Corax didn't even have to look to know who it was. That tone, that barely concealed sneer, could only belong to Verax of the Crone Empire, 3rd Cycle Warrior class, wearing that ridiculous custom armor plating inlaid with silver. His kind were always the same, tough, proud, and utterly unprepared for the truth. Corax turned slowly toward him, offering a smile, though to most species present, it likely resembled a threat display. Ah, Verax, he said, tapping the lectern again. The projection changed to a series of rotating 3D models. Earth's apex predators, microscopic pathogens, and insects with toxin profiles that would make a bioengineer weep. Tell me, Corax said casually, what's the strongest natural armor used in your empire's military? Verax straightened in his seat with pride. The Krakon battle shell. It can withstand direct plasma impacts and resists almost every known toxin. Corax gave a slow nod. Fascinating, he murmured, magnifying one of the rotating images. It settled on a spider, a small, dark, unassuming creature with segmented legs and glistening fangs. Would you be surprised to learn that there are creatures on Earth, smaller than your central eye, whose venom can dissolve that armor in minutes? The room erupted in skeptical chittering. A few students laughed. One of the gas-based life forms condensed nervously in its containment field. Verax's posture stiffened, his chromed shoulder plates clicking against his back. With all due respect, Professor, he said, that's impossible. Earth's military tech is primitive. They're still using projectiles and atomic fission. Their biological weapons can't compare to. This isn't about weapons, Corax interrupted, his voice calm but firm. It's about evolution. He changed the display again. The spider filled the room in terrifying detail. This, he said, is the Sydney funnel web spider. Its venom is so potent it can kill a human in minutes. Now imagine what it could do to an alien physiology, especially one unprepared for its complex neurotoxin structure. There was silence. Then, quietly, a student near the back activated her personal shield. Corax smiled wider. Earth, he continued, is a planet forged in violence, Its gravity is nearly double that of the galactic average. Its atmosphere is filled with corrosive gases. The entire biosphere is locked in a relentless chemical arms race that has continued uninterrupted for over 4 billion years. Every creature, no matter how small, has evolved not just to survive but to win. Virax folded all 4 arms across his chest. Then why isn't it quarantined? Why do we allow student exchanges from there? Before Corax could answer, the lecture hall door slid open with a soft hiss. A human stepped inside, holding a cup of something steaming and aromatic. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his ID badge askew, and his sweater had clearly seen better days. "Sorry I'm late," the human said casually. "4th coffee today." "No, I don't have a problem." Corax gestured with all 3 appendages. "Ah, speaking of Earth. Class, meet Max Thompson, our human exchange student and teaching assistant this semester." Max gave a 2-fingered wave. Several students visibly flinched. Corax noticed. "Yes," he said dryly, "those hands are real. And yes, the musculature is unusually strong." Max grinned. "You should see our toddlers." There was nervous laughter. One of the crystalline students whispered something and turned up their shield's intensity. Corax cleared his throat again. "Max will be assisting with practical demonstrations. And yes, for those wondering, our biology lab is indeed located in a bunker 5 levels below ground. Just standard protocol when dealing with Earth life." Virax's head crest flared again. "Professor, I still challenge your classification. Earth cannot possibly meet the standards of a Class 13 death world. Under Article 7, even of the University Charter, I formally demand practical evidence." Corax's third eye sparkled. "A challenge? Very well, Virax. How would you suggest we proceed?" Virax stood to his full height, armor gleaming, 4 fists clenched. "A field trip. To this Australian outback you mentioned." A collective gasp filled the room. Even the gas cloud student recoiled slightly. Max, in the process of sipping his coffee, spat it out across the nearest row of desks. "You want to go where? Have you lost your damn minds?" Corax raised a calming hand. Now. Max, as an accredited arachnologist. "Wait, what now?" Max asked, looking alarmed. "It's in your student file," Corax said smoothly. "And quite fortuitous, I must say." Virax pounded a gauntleted fist into his palm. "Then it's settled. I will demonstrate the superiority of my battle shell against any of Earth's deadly life forms." Corax's membrane-covered teeth stretched wide again. University regulations require a minimum of 3 solar cycles for off-world field trip prep. I suggest you all update your medical insurance and next of kin documentation. As the students began whispering anxiously among themselves, Corax turned to his datapad and began logging the request for special access to Earth's deadliest region. He already knew how this would end. It always ended the same way. But some lessons, he had learned, must be lived to be understood. And the smallest creatures often made the biggest impressions. Field trip to hell, destination Earth. Preparations for the field trip began almost immediately after Virax issued his challenge. Despite Professor Corax's outwardly calm acceptance, he wasted no time submitting the necessary documentation to Galactic University's Interplanetary Risk and Logistics Office. Within hours, Earth's Australian outback had been designated a temporary research zone under Observation Protocol 9, subsection B, high risk, high value educational expeditions. Of course, no one told the students that subsection B had a historical survival rate of only 62%. Virax, for his part, was thriving on the attention. The moment he stepped out of the lecture hall, he summoned the nearest armor-smith drone to reinforce his battle shell with additional toxin-repellent plating and adaptive climate shielding. His bragging echoed down every corridor of the university's warrior dormitories. "This is what we train for," he bellowed at anyone who would listen. "Let's see how these Earth creatures fare against crack-on engineering." Many listened. Fewer believed. The rest of the class prepared with markedly more concern. The Zion students pooled their credits to upgrade their containment fields to premium multi-layer plasma shields. A gas-based student named Pluth attempted to contract a mercenary escort, only to be politely reminded that bringing off-world weapons into Earth's biosphere violated 17 interspecies treaties and could trigger an ecological war. Even Max, the human exchange student who was supposedly just here to assist, spent the next few days walking around with a haunted expression of someone who knew exactly how bad this could go. "You don't get it," Max said one afternoon, pacing the cafeteria and trying to make eye contact with a group of uninterested gelatinous students. "This isn't just dangerous, it's Australia. That's like dangerous with a mullet, sunglasses, and a beer can in each hand while it calls you mate and tries to set you on fire. Humans are always exaggerating," one of the crystalline students muttered. "Right," Max snapped, slapping down a datapad filled with headlines. "See this, snake bites man in toilet. That happened. This one, spider hides in banana, family hospitalized. Octopus poisons tourist who thought it was a rock." The students didn't look convinced. Max gave up and stormed off, muttering, "It's not paranoia if everything really is out to kill you." 3 solar cycles passed in a blur of frantic preparations. Medical waivers were signed. Emergency contact forms were updated. More than one student attempted to drop the class and was firmly denied. "Field experience is a core component of your grade," Professor Korax reminded them. "Survival builds character." Finally, departure day arrived. The entire class assembled in the teleportation chamber, and from the outside, it looked like a military expedition gearing up for combat. Bioscanners, thermal regulators, toxin neutralizers, and motion detectors blinked softly on armor, containment suits, and nervous appendages. The only thing missing was actual weaponry, which, of course, was strictly forbidden. Max stood to the side, sipping his coffee like a man condemned. "We're seriously doing this, huh?" he said to no one in particular. Professor Korax clapped his hands' tentacles, appendages, together and beamed with all 3 eyes. "Excellent, everyone's here. Now remember, we're entering a restricted ecological zone of Earth. The humans have kindly cleared our presence with their local authorities. There's a fully staffed medical facility on standby." A few students stiffened. "Why would we need a medical facility?" asked one small amphibious student nervously. "Oh, no reason," Korax replied with that terrifying smile. "Just standard protocol when visiting a Class 13 death world." He turned to Max. "Would you do the honors of entering the coordinates?" Max stared at the teleportation console, then at the professor. "You know what? Fine. But I want it recorded that this is the worst idea since humans invented chocolate for dogs." "Noted," Korax said cheerfully. As the teleportation field powered up, humming with quantum resonance, Virax stepped to the front of the group and struck what he clearly thought was a heroic pose. "There is nothing in this Australia that can threaten a Kraken warrior," he declared. The last thing the class heard before the beam engaged was Max muttering under his breath, "Famous last words, mate. Famous last words." The teleportation ended with a jarring thunk as the entire class materialized in the middle of the Australian outback and promptly collapsed under the weight of Earth's gravity. Well, most of them did. Virax staggered slightly, but remained upright, his battle armor compensating for the extra force. "By the seven suns," groaned a Xeon student, their crystalline frame creaking. "How do humans live like this?" Max, unfazed, took a deep breath of the thick, oxygen-rich air. "Oh, this," he said cheerfully. "This is nothing. You should try diving into the Mariana Trench. Now that's pressure." Professor Corax activated his anti-grav stabilizers with an elegant hum and floated just above the dusty ground. "Students, please, observe your physiological responses. This mere seconds after arrival is why Earth qualifies as a Class 13 death world, and we haven't even encountered the wildlife yet." As if summoned by narrative timing, a kangaroo bounded by in the distance. 3 students screamed. One activated a personal shield, the gas cloud being condensed into a shimmering panic sphere. Virax, to no one's surprise, scoffed. That bouncing creature, barely registered as a threat. Max rolled his eyes. Right. Because on Earth, animals need weapons to be dangerous. They began moving across the designated survey area, scanning for local specimens. Virax led the group, waving his arms dramatically. "You call this hostile? My home world has acid rain and volcano storms." Professor Corax jotted notes excitedly. "And how many of your native species produce neurotoxins through dermal contact?" "None." "How many can kill you by brushing past your armor?" "Also, none." "And how many actively attack beings 1,000 times their size?" "Not really a thing where I am from." The bravado in Virax's voice had started to waver. Then came the scream. One of the students shrieked, pointing at a patch of dirt. Something small, brown, fast. Something move. Tamal. Max peered over and snorted. "That's just a huntsman spider. Totally harmless. Well, unless you're driving and it drops on your face. Then you might crash and die. But that's not technically the spider's fault." The entire class took 3 synchronized steps backward. Virax stepped forward. "You call that a spider? It's not even the size of my auxiliary power cell." Before anyone could stop him, he raised one armored foot and stopped. Boom. Boom. A small crater formed in the red dirt. "There," Virax said smugly. "Handled." Corax and Max exchanged glances. "Virax," Corax said calmly, "please activate your microscopic threat scanner. Now scan the crater." Virax frowned but obeyed. The scanner lit up. "Ooh, there are dozens of smaller life forms scuttling away. That's not supposed to happen." Max smiled grimly. "Welcome to Earth, where even the things you kill come with a backup squad." The class tightened formation after that. Every scanner was turned to maximum sensitivity. Even Virax was starting to look less confident. His head crest just slightly drooped. "Professor?" he asked quietly. "How small did you say that funnel web spider was again?" Corax tapped his datapad, "About the size of your smallest finger joint." "Why do you ask?" Virax stared down at his sensor display. "No reason," he said weakly. "Just checking." As the sun beat down from the harsh Australian sky, the group continued into the outback, unaware that the most educational moment of the trip was still waiting, just a few feet beneath the soil, when the wildlife fights back. By the time the students reached the designated search perimeter, the Australian sun was already blazing overhead, baking the red earth and shimmering off the endless horizon like an oven door cracked open. The harsh conditions were beginning to wear on the more delicate species in the group. The Xeon students had to activate their crystalline cooling systems every few minutes to avoid cracking. The gas cloud beings were visibly thinning in the dry air, and even the insectoid twins from the Glexer moons were wilting slightly in their armored exosuits. Only Virax still strutted like he was on a victory parade, his massive battle armor gleaming in the sun as he surveyed the terrain with the arrogance only youth and ignorance could fuel. "This," he declared loudly, "is what you call a hostile environment. This is barely a challenge. My homeworld's average temperature is twice this. The winds alone could shear unarmored flesh from bone." Professor Corax floated alongside the students, anti-grav lift humming gently beneath him, his datapad in constant motion. Yes, very impressive. And how many of your native species secrete neurotoxins? Virax hesitated. Well, none but. And how many can kill you just by brushing against your skin? Also none but. And do any of them deliberately engage creatures several thousand times their size in unprovoked attacks? Not unless they're malfunctioning. Fascinating, Corax said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm as he logged another data point. Now let's see how Earth measures up. The group spread out, scanners at the ready. Max led a smaller team toward a ridge, clearly exhausted but determined to at least keep everyone alive long enough to prove a point. Okay, they called out, remember what I said in the briefing. You're not looking for danger. You're walking on it. Anything that looks harmless probably isn't. A few skeptical students chuckled. That changed fast. It began with a scream, sharp and high-pitched, full of raw terror. Everyone spun around. A student from the Meridian cluster had stumbled back from what looked like an ordinary patch of dirt. They were pointing, vibrating in panic. Something moved. They shrieked, tiny, brown, too many legs. Max wandered over, squinting at the ground. Then they chuckled. Oh, that's just a huntsman spider. Totally harmless. The entire class recoiled in horror. Well, Max added, rubbing the back of their neck, unless one drops onto your face while you're driving. Then it could cause a crash. But, that's not the spider's fault. No one found it funny. Xerax, of course, stepped forward with an exaggerated scoff. You call that a spider? It's smaller than my armor's emergency power cell. Before anyone could object, he raised one armored foot and slammed it down onto the patch of dirt. A loud crack echoed as the earth beneath his foot cratered slightly. Dust billowed outward. There, he said smugly, handled. Professor Corax raised a brow. Virax, would you kindly scan the impact site with your microscopic threat detection system? Virax grumbled, but complied. His armor beeped, and then lit up like a New Year's celebration. There are dozens of small life forms dispersing from the area. Max squatted next to the crater. Yeah, that'd be the rest of the nest. Congrats. You've just pissed off the whole family. The mood of the class shifted, fast. Shields hummed to life. Defensive bubbles formed. Even the usually stoic Zion students were muttering nervously. For the first time since arriving, Virax looked uneasy. They pressed on with significantly tighter formations. Every chirp of a scanner, every rustle of wind through the brush, sent ripples of tension through the group. Max tried to explain as much as possible to calm them down, but their explanations didn't help. Some of our caterpillars are venomous, they said matter-of-factly as a student stepped over a small plant. Oh, and trees. We've got poisonous trees too. A Zion student, who had been leaning against a tree, leapt away with a yelp. Different tree, Max added helpfully. Probably. Professor Corax, meanwhile, looked like he was having the time of his academic life. He was recording feverishly, his data pad smoking from overuse. Truly remarkable, The sheer density of lethal organisms in this ecosystem is unprecedented. Students, note how even seemingly empty space between known threats may harbor invisible dangers. The lesson was interrupted by a sharp shout from Virax. Everyone rushed over to find him crouched over a small hole in the ground. A delicate web framed the entrance, anchored in red soil. The scanners buzzed wildly. "This is it," Virax said, his voice almost gleeful. "The funnel web spider. Look how small it is. My armor's environmental seals can easily." "Xerax," Max said, suddenly deadly serious. "Back away, slowly." The shift in their voice made half the class freeze. "Why, I can?" "No, you chrome-plated idiot." It was too late. From the hole, something emerged. Small, fast, furious. The Sydney funnel-web spider, no larger than a fingertip, launched itself toward Virax with a speed and precision that defied logic, physics, and the spider's own anatomy. One moment it was outside the armor. The next, it had somehow found a gap microscopic, almost imperceptible, and slipped inside. Virax's laughter died instantly. There was silence. The shift in their voice made half the class freeze. "Why? Why? I can." "No, you chrome-plated idiot." It was too late. From the hole, something emerged. Small, fast, furious. The Sydney funnel-web spider, no larger than a fingertip, launched itself toward Virax with a speed and precision that defied logic, physics, and the spider's own anatomy. One moment it was outside the armor. The next, it had somehow found a gap microscopic, almost imperceptible, and slipped inside. Virax's laughter died instantly. There was silence. Then, a scream. Then, scream. Not just any scream. A primal, soul-wrenching, galaxy-wide scream that echoed off every rock, tree, and insect in the outback. Birds took flight. Nearby lizards scattered. Max winced. "Oh no," they muttered. "We're in it now." Virax flailed, armor alarms blaring in a dozen languages as smoke began rising from his shoulder joint. It's dissolving my secondary carapace." Professor Corax's eyes gleamed. "Fascinating. Students, please take note of the venom's speed and effect on advanced materials." "Help me," Virax shrieked. Max was already moving. They activated their emergency beacon and opened a communication link. "This is Max Thompson. Immediate evac required. Funnel web bite. Yes, another one. No, I don't know why tourists keep doing this." By the time the emergency teleportation team arrived, Virax was curled on the ground in a twitching, groaning heap, smoke still rising from his armor's joints. The spider, having done its job, was long gone, probably back in its burrow, telling its friends about the idiot in shiny metal who thought he could win a fight. The rest of the students watched in stunned silence as Virax was taken away. It had taken less than 30 seconds to turn the most powerful warrior in the class into a sobbing wreck, and all because he underestimated something the size of a paperclip. Max clapped their hands. "Lesson 1 complete. Who's ready for lesson 2? No one responded. Even the gas cloud was trembling. "Thought so," Max muttered, sipping their coffee. "Welcome to Earth. Fangs, failure, and funnel webs." Virax had faced down war beasts on moons with no names. He had charged into plasma fire during simulations so brutal they sent lesser cadets into trauma comas. He trained in the harshest conditions his planet could manufacture: acid storms, zero-G combat, endurance marches across molten plains. None of that prepared him for a spider the size of his pinky finger joint. The emergency teleportation sequence triggered with a sharp crack of quantum discharge. Verax vanished mid-scream, his final words something halfway between venom and mommy echoing behind him, in a voice several octaves too high for someone wearing power armor. Silence followed. The kind of silence only horror can produce. Professor Corax lowered his datapad slowly, his third eye blinking with academic satisfaction. "Well," he said, that was illuminating. Max let out a long breath and turned to the rest of the class, many of whom were still frozen in place. "That," they said, "is why Earth has 5 different evacuation protocols just for spider-related incidents. And that one wasn't even the deadliest we've got." No one laughed. Even the gas cloud was flickering nervously, its containment field wobbling with tension. They didn't move for several minutes. It was as though the land itself had gone quiet, as if every creature within a mile was watching, waiting. Eventually, Professor Corax clapped his hands or equivalent appendages together and said, "Students, please record this moment. What we've just witnessed is a rare and valuable field observation of cross-species venom reactions in real time. I believe it will serve as the cornerstone of this semester's coursework." "Cornerstone?" one student squeaked. "He almost died," another whispered. "Yes," Corax beamed. "Isn't it thrilling?" Max sighed. "All right, we need to get moving. The sun's reaching peak heat, and that's when everything around here gets feisty." "Feisty?" a Zion student asked. "Like excited to kill things." That got the class moving. They huddled together now, no longer trying to act brave or superior. Their scanners were set to maximum sensitivity, the buzzing and pinging overlapping into a constant background hum of panic. Max walked in front, scanning the ground like a soldier, checking for landmines. They didn't get far before another problem arose. Verax had dropped his environmental recorder in the dirt during his ill-fated standoff. Corax, ever the collector of useful data, insisted someone retrieve it. No one volunteered. Eventually, Max sighed and walked over, crouching down carefully beside the blast crater Verax had created. The recorder was half melted, its casing still smoking faintly. Max picked it up, still intact. "Just needs." A sharp clicking noise stopped them mid-sentence. They froze. Then slowly, very slowly, they looked down. A tiny leg poked out from under a rock. Then, another. And another. "Bah!" Corax called from a safe distance. "Everything all right?" "I don't want to alarm anyone," Max said, voice flat, "but I think we just found the rest of the nest." A chorus of nope echoed through the students as they collectively began backing away. One activated their emergency teleportation beacon on the spot and vanished in a flash of light. Corax frowned. "That's against protocol. Points will be deducted." The rest of the class retreated a safe distance while Max calmly, carefully stepped back from the growing ripple of spider legs, now spilling out from under the rocks like a living carpet. Dozens, maybe hundreds of small brown bodies wriggled and scurried across the soil. "Okay," Max said. "Fun fact. Most funnel web spiders don't live alone. Sometimes the juvenile males group together during molting seasons." The group stared, wide-eyed. "And I think," Max added, "we just interrupted one of those seasons." Panic hit like a meteor. Scanners screamed with motion alerts. Heat sensors overloaded. Students tripped over one another in their scramble to retreat. A gelatinous being dissolved into a puddle from sheer terror. The crystalline Zion emitted a high-frequency scream that cracked a nearby rock. "Calm down," Corax barked, floating higher. We cannot allow fear to... Something leapt from the dirt and hit his anti-grav unit. The professor's propulsion system sparked. He dropped a full meter before recovering, now spinning gently and wildly, gesturing for stability. Noted, he muttered. Seer may be warranted. Max slammed their emergency beacon again. Teleportation emergency. Multiple hostile biological contacts coordinate spread now. But Earth's teleportation protocols were slow. They had to be interference from the atmosphere, the density of organic life, not to mention the fact that too many overlapping teleportations could cause interdimensional cross-linking. No one wanted to fuse into a wall. As the students stumbled toward higher ground, the spiders retreated as quickly as they had emerged, no doubt returning to their burrows. Mission accomplished. Max dropped to one knee, catching their breath. See, that's how they work. Hit and run. Get just close enough to say, hey, remember me. I am submitting a formal complaint to the University Council. One student gasped, crawling across the sand. This was not in the course syllabus. Oh, it was. Corax called, still drifting above. Charred but delighted. Page 17. Note. Field excursions may involve sudden life-threatening encounters with hyper-adapted terrestrial organisms. Very small print, I'll admit. Back at the emergency staging area, a medical drone buzzed in from orbit, sent from the Sydney Interspecies Emergency Center. It floated gently down and extended a holographic display. Patient, Verax of the Krakon Empire. Status, critical, stabilizing. Max slumped in relief. Inside the med bay, Verax was sedated, wrapped in biofoam, and suspended in a nutrient tank. His once proud armor lay next to him in pieces, pitted, corroded, some parts bubbling. The spider's venom had bypassed every defense system his people had developed over centuries of warfare. A human doctor stood at the observation window, frowning at the readout. He's lucky, Dr. Reynolds said. Another minute and we would have been scooping him into a jar. Corax drifted up beside her, fascinating. Do you happen to have molecular scans of the venom's interaction with his exoskeletal alloys? The doctor gave him a flat look. You're taking notes? Of course. This is textbook material. Max leaned against the wall, arms crossed, quietly watching Verax float in recovery. He looked more like an overcooked crustacean than a fearsome warrior. He didn't think it could hurt him, Max said quietly. Yeah, Reynolds replied. Nobody ever does. First-time Earth visitors always think they're indestructible. Then nature introduces itself. Back at the university's temporary outpost, the students were unusually quiet. No one joked. No one bragged. They sat on crates, medical pods, and data consoles, staring at their field logs like they were sacred texts. Professor Corax addressed them from the top of a supply crate. Class, today you have received an education unlike any other. Not from textbooks, not from lectures, but from Earth itself. He gestured toward the screen, which showed a slow-motion replay of the spider entering Verax's armor. The footage was already going viral on the university's private academic network. Now tell me, he said, what's the first rule of xenobiology when visiting a Class 13 death world? Every student, in perfect unison, answered, never underestimate anything. Corax smiled. Correct. And what's the second? If it's small, it's probably worse. He clapped with satisfaction. Excellent. Verax, would you care to... Oh, right. He's still unconscious. Max sipped their sixth coffee of the day and spoke softly. He'll wake up, hopefully wiser. One student raised a cautious appendage. Professor, next week's field trip. Is it also on Earth? Corax's smile returned, wider than ever. Oh no, he said. The students exhaled. It's in the ocean. The scream that followed was collective, layered, and long enough to be picked up by orbiting satellites, survival studies, and sudden respect. 1 week after the now infamous field trip to Earth, Galactic University's Xenobiology 101 class looked and behaved very differently. Gone were the overconfident strides, the smug dismissals of primitive Earth life, and the subtle clicks and hisses of disbelief that once followed every mention of the so-called death world in their place. A classroom so quiet, so alert, and so focused that even Professor Corax had paused before beginning his lecture, just to admire the transformation. Attendance? Flawless. Not a single absence. Preparation? Immaculate. Every student arrived 15 minutes early, shield generators powered up, notes preloaded, and eyes locked forward like they were expecting the spiders to crawl out of the walls at any moment. Most noticeably, however, was the armor. Even the students who previously wore nothing more than translator bands and basic hazard suits were now encased in reinforced environmental exoshells. Many had added personal filtration systems, retractable face shields, and even emergency teleportation triggers calibrated to activate on reflex. The ZIN student who once scoffed at redundant shielding now walked around in a shimmering double containment bubble. The floating gas cloud now carried a backup containment unit and a spare. At the front of the class, Professor Corax watched with thinly veiled satisfaction, his datapad hovering beside him, already logging notes for a future paper titled Fear as a Catalyst for Academic Rigor, a case study. And that, he said, concluding a data-heavy review of the field trip's telemetry logs, is why Earth remains classified as a Class 13 death world. Not due to size, nor to technology, but because of its relentless, creative, and utterly unforgiving biological diversity. He gestured toward a new slide, a montage of Earth creatures caught during their trip. The huntsman spider that caused the first panic, the funnel web that nearly ended Virax's academic career, and in the center, Virax himself, mid-scream, captured by a stunned student's recorder. A few students winced. One looked like they were going to be sick, but none of them laughed. Now, Corax said, pacing slowly across the lecture platform, who can summarize the primary lesson from our field excursion. Every tentacle, claw, pseudopod, and sensory organ in the room went up simultaneously. Very good, he nodded. Yes, Pluth. The gas cloud's translator buzzed. Never underestimate Earth life forms. Excellent, Corax beamed. And why? Why? A chorus of voices answered, because 4 billion years of evolution have turned everything into a survival-optimized death machine. Corax's smile widened. Indeed. And as we saw, even a creature the size of a fingernail can take down a fully armored Kraken warrior if it's motivated enough. At that moment, the classroom doors slid open with a soft chime. Every student tensed, some raised their shields on reflex before relaxing as a familiar figure stepped inside. Virax. Virax. He walked with a limp, but he walked. His new armor gleamed, thicker than before, with layered plating, active countermeasures, and a helmet that looked like it had more sensors than the university's main observatory. His headrest, usually a proud display of ego, remained flat and retracted. "Welcome back, Virax," Corax said warmly. "I live," Virax replied dryly, taking his seat near the front of the class, a spot once reserved for boasting, now reclaimed for silent observation. "And stronger for the experience, I hope." Virax made a noise that could have been agreement, or indigestion. The students whispered among themselves, amazed at the transformation. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He just watched. Listened. Max, who had been nursing what was probably their 5th coffee of the day, leaned back in their seat near the professor's platform and gave Virax a casual nod. Looking good, Chrome Dome. Still twitch when you see spiders. I scan every room now, Virax admitted, rubbing his forearm twice. Corax cleared his throat. Xerax, perhaps you could share a few of your medical observations from your recovery period. Virax looked like he wanted to decline. But after a pause, he sighed and stood. I've been studying, he began. The venom, the spiders, the biology, all of it. He tapped his datapad, and a slide appeared on the central display. Earth's medical protocols and venom countermeasures. Do you know, he continued, that Earth's medical database includes treatment for over 10,000 different toxins and venoms? And that's just from species native to their planet? The class murmured in astonishment. I was injected with one of them, Virax said quietly. Not even their deadliest, not even close, and it melted my armor. Made of kraken alloy, dissolved it, like it was paper. Another slide appeared a molecular breakdown of the funnel web's venom reacting with Virax's biochemistry. Chemical chains tangled and detonated like miniature bombs. What I experienced, Virax said, wasn't just a bite. It was a biological assault designed by millions of years of natural selection. That spider didn't care who I was, what empire I came from, or what armor I wore. It saw a threat, and it neutralized it fast, efficiently. Without hesitation, he looked up, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only understanding. I fought in training simulations since I could walk. But nothing prepared me for Earth. Not because Earth is powerful, but because it doesn't stop. Everything there is a weapon. The animals, the weather, the terrain, even the trees want to kill you. Max raised a hand. Don't forget the snails. A few students glanced around nervously. Oh right, Max said with a smirk. We're doing marine life next week. The entire class recoiled. Corax clapped his hands. Ah, yes. Thank you, Max, for reminding me. Our next topic is Earth's aquatic biosphere. Twice as dangerous, thrice as diverse. Groans echoed through the room. One student quietly activated a shield. Max stood and stretched. Also, I should probably mention, I'm not actually an arachnologist. Corax tilted his head. Oh? I'm a marine biologist, Max said cheerfully. Specifically, I study cone snails, cute little things, beautiful shells. Venom potent enough to kill 20 humans before you even realize you've been stung. A silence that followed was total. Then, click, click, click the sound of shield generators powering to max. One student launched an emergency teleport. Another ducked behind their desk. Even Virax took a cautious step away. Max grinned. Relax. I didn't bring any. Well, not alive. Corax was practically vibrating with excitement. Max, I believe this is the beginning of a very productive academic collaboration. I like to think of it more as public service, Max said, sipping their coffee. Helping aliens not die horribly, one field trip at a time. Virax returned to his seat, pulling his armor tighter around him. I've already started writing my thesis, he said, voice still quiet. Oh? Corax asked. On what subject? Survival strategies for Class 13 Death World encounters. His headrest twitched. Subtitle: How Not to Die Screaming. Corax beamed. Excellent. I look forward to reading it. The lecture ended a few minutes later, but no one left. The students stayed behind, asking questions, re-watching footage, taking more notes than Corax had ever seen in a single semester. There was a spark in their eyes now, not just fear, but respect, curiosity sharpened by survival instinct. As the last few filtered out, Max stayed behind, casually scrolling through their messages. Corax floated beside them, still reviewing data logs. "You ever gonna tell Verax that Spider was just the female juvenile?" Max grinned. "Let's save that for graduation." Corax chuckled. "Fair enough." Outside, the distant hum of a shuttle engine echoed as the next class arrived. Another group of fresh students, full of confidence, unaware of what Earth had waiting for them. But this class would never forget. Because on Earth, survival wasn't a skill. It was an art, shell games, and deadlier truths. The week after the field trip, something shifted across the campus of Galactic University. It wasn't just the Xenobiology 101 students, though they were still triple-checking air filters and scanning dorms for spiders every morning. No, the ripple went further than that. Word of the Verax incident, as it was now called, had spread beyond the Xenobiology department. Students from other disciplines, engineering, diplomacy, even astrolaw started attending lectures just to hear Professor Corax explain how a creature smaller than a data chip nearly sent one of the galaxy's toughest warriors home in a jar. Enrollment in xenobiology spiked. So did the demand for Earth studies electives. Meanwhile, Professor Corax couldn't have been happier. He was already preparing a conference presentation titled "The Bipedal Paradox: How Human Environments Defy Standardized Threat Assessment Metrics." It was shaping up to be his finest work yet. And then came the twist no one saw coming. It started with a casual conversation, just another debrief after class. Corax was reviewing footage from the field trip. Max slouched beside him, sipping coffee number something. The two had developed an odd but effective working rhythm. Corax, with his meticulous, academic precision, Max with their sarcastic realism and lived experience. It worked. "Max," Corax said, eyes flicking across a high-res image of the funnel web bite, "I must say your expertise in arachnology has been invaluable." Max choked slightly on their drink. "Wait, I'm sorry, what now?" "Your arachnology background," Corax repeated. "It's in your exchange file. You were assigned to assist in field identification of Earth's arthropod-class organisms." Max blinked. "Yeah, so about that." Corax paused, one eye focusing on Max, while the other two kept scrolling data. "I'm not an arachnologist," Max admitted, putting their coffee down. "Not even close." Now all three of Corax's eyes locked on them. "Come again?" "I'm a marine biologist. I study ocean stuff. Specifically, cone snails." The silence that followed could have swallowed a star. Corax stared, expression unreadable. Max shrugged, looking mildly guilty. "Look, there was a clerical error in the database. Someone filed me under arachnids because of a paper I co-authored on venom classification. But my actual thesis was on Conus geographus. You know, pretty shell, deadly neurotoxin, kills humans in minutes." Corax blinked slowly. "You specialize in cone snails?" "Yeah. Deadly cone snails. Super deadly. Some can harpoon prey with venom that shuts down your nervous system before you even feel the sting." Corax was absolutely still for a full 10 seconds. Then finally, he whispered, "Fascinating." That evening, Corax added a new entry to his next semester's syllabus, Marine Biohazards of Planet Earth. Practical Demonstration Week. The next class session started like any other. The students shuffled in with their usual layers of shields, sealed, suits, and backup containment pods. Virax sat near the front, his new armor clicking softly with every tiny adjustment. He didn't say much these days. The trauma hadn't made him quieter, it had made him wiser. He now read every assigned paper 3 times and brought printed backups. His battle shell had 27 new threat detection subroutines. "All right, everyone," Korex said, beaming. "Today we will be exploring Earth's marine biodiversity. We are fortunate to be joined once again by our resident human expert, Max Thompson." Max stood and walked to the front of the class, holding a sleek black container about the size of a small lunchbox. "Good morning," they said. "So, last week, we talked about spiders. This week, we're going underwater." A collective shiver ran through the room. "Now," Max continued, "I told you I was a marine biologist. I study toxic sea life. The kind of stuff that's really beautiful, right before it ruins your day." Virax instinctively reached for his helmet's environmental lock. Others followed suit. Max placed the box on the demonstration table and popped it open with a click. Inside were a series of small, polished seashells, displayed in neat rows on a padded case. "These," Max said, holding one up, "are cone shells. Specifically, from cone snails. Gorgeous, right?" Several students leaned forward cautiously. "They're found in shallow, tropical waters, places humans like to swim. Some people collect the shells as souvenirs." Max paused, "until one stings them through the glove and drops them on the beach, paralyzed and dying." The class recoiled. "Most snails are harmless. These guys, these are the ninjas of mollusks. They've got a retractable harpoon. Yes, a harpoon that delivers a venom cocktail strong enough to stop a human heart in minutes. And that's if you're lucky. If you're not, it just shuts down your muscles and leaves you fully conscious while you suffocate." A Xi'an student dropped their datapad. Max smiled sympathetically. "Yeah, Earth's oceans are fun." Korex was absolutely glowing. "Students, please note, this is an excellent example of convergent evolution and venom specialization in aquatic invertebrates." Max continued. "These snails don't chase. They wait. They sense chemical signals in the water. When prey gets close, bam, harpoon strike. And they don't just paralyze. Some venom strains cause hallucinations, confusion, even euphoria, which is why researchers call them the smiling death." Virax slowly raised a hand. "Yes," Max asked. "Are they here?" Max looked surprised. "What? No. These are just empty shells. The actual snails are back on Earth, safely contained." Virax slowly lowered his hand, but his armor didn't relax. Max hesitated. "Okay, so, full disclosure." Korax perked up. "I did bring one," Max admitted. "But it's sealed in a level 4 biocontainment pod in the med bay, behind 3 locked doors and a robot guard named Sheila." The entire class groaned. A few shields activated. One student began preparing an emergency jump protocol. Max held up both hands. "Relax. I'm not letting anyone near it. I just wanted you to see the kind of creatures Earth hides in places you think are safe. Beaches, coral reefs, pretty lagoons. You think you're stepping on sand, and it turns out to be a living syringe with a grudge." The class was now completely silent, every eye on Max. "Earth isn't trying to kill you out of malice," Max said, voice softer now. "It's just ready. Everything there evolved with one lesson in mind. You survive or you don't. And that lesson, it applies to us too." Professor Korax stepped forward, nodding in agreement. which is why this module has been extended. We will be spending the next 4 weeks on Earth's aquatic life. From jellyfish to cephalopods to, yes, the infamous cone snail. A collective wave of anxiety washed over the students. Verax stood slowly, armor whirring. "Professor, are we going back to Earth?" Corax raised a brow. "Indeed. Where this time?" Corax smiled. "Northern Queensland, the Great Barrier Reef. A shallow zone rich with biodiversity." Verax stared. Max nodded slowly. "Box jellyfish, blue-ringed octopuses, sea snakes, oh, and stonefish. Step on one, and it's like being stabbed by a volcano." Several students began quietly muttering their last wills into their datapads. Max clapped once. "Look, I know you're scared. That's smart. But here's the thing, you survived the outback. Barely sure, but you made it. Now you've got data, gear, and something most aliens don't get when they study Earth." They paused, letting the moment land. "Respect," Corax added, "and that, class, is the ultimate lesson. Not fear, not avoidance, but respect. For evolution, for adaptation, for life that thrives in the harshest of places." The bell chimed, signaling the end of the lecture. As the students filed out slowly, warily, Max turned to Corax and said, "So, when should we tell them that the cone snail's not even in Earth's top 10 deadliest marine creatures?" Corax chuckled, all 3 eyes glinting. "Let's wait until after they pass the swim test." From his place at the back of the room, Verax muttered, "I hate her." Max grinned. "Yeah, most people do." Into the deep. Welcome to the ocean. The shuttle descended through thick, humid clouds, cutting across the turquoise sky like a scalpel. Below, the northern coastline of Australia glistened in the sunlight, an endless stretch of sand and sea framed by jagged coral reefs and shallow lagoons that looked like paradise. To anyone unfamiliar, it was paradise. To Professor Corax's Xenobiology 101 class, however, it was a Class 13 aqueous death trap wrapped in a postcard. The students, once fearless, now deeply cautious, sat silently inside the shuttle. No one fidgeted, no one argued, and no one removed their helmets. Not after what happened in the outback. That incident had left a permanent mark on their psyches, and in Verax's case, his insurance premiums. "Touchdown in 2 minutes," announced the pilot, a cheerful AI who had been programmed without the capacity for empathy. "Remind me why we're doing this again," one Xian student asked, voice shaking slightly. "For science," Max replied from the front row, sipping an iced coffee like they were heading to the beach for fun. "Also because your professor got very excited about the idea of marine neurotoxins." Professor Corax nodded proudly, hovering slightly above the aisle as his anti-grav rig whirred. Indeed, terrestrial life provided valuable data, but Earth's oceans are even more biodiverse, unpredictable, and chemically inventive. "I'm thrilled," the Xian groaned softly. The shuttle touched down on a floating marine research platform just offshore, gently rocking with the motion of the waves. It was a state-of-the-art facility equipped for xenobiological observation, climate adaptation, and, most importantly, emergency medevac. Professor Corax addressed the class as they disembarked. "Today, we begin Phase 2 of your education. We'll be studying Earth's most dangerous aquatic organisms in their natural habitat. As always, stay with your groups, follow Max's instructions, and if your armor starts melting, signal immediately." "Wait," said a crystalline student. "Did you just say if our armor starts melting?" Max clapped a reassuring hand on their shoulder. "Yeah, Don't worry. It probably won't happen. The student looked ill. Within the hour, the class was divided into groups and issued underwater exploration gear. For most, this meant sealed aquatic exosuits with oxygen filtration, antitoxin circulators, and emergency flotation jets. For Verax, it meant yet another upgrade to his battle shell, now pressure-resistant and coated in Chiden mimicry paint to reduce visibility underwater. "It's like going into battle," he muttered as the final armor seal locked in place. "No," Max said, strapping on their own fins. "It's worse, because out here, there's no front line. The battlefield is everywhere." The descent began from a secured dive lift that dropped them down into the reef zone. Schools of bright, iridescent fish darted past. Sea turtles glided by like slow, ancient ghosts. The water was warm and deceptively calm. Mac's voice came through the comms. "All right, listen up. Keep scanners active. Earth's most venomous marine animals aren't always the big ones. You're not looking for sharks or monsters. You're looking for things that don't look dangerous. That's what'll kill you." A Xi'an student glanced down at their scanner, which was already pinging with faint toxin markers. "Oh. Is that normal?" "Oh yeah," Max replied. "Everything down here is leaking venom into the water. Welcome to the reef." The first encounter came unexpectedly. Of course, a student from the feathered Venari species drifted too close to the ocean floor. Something moved beneath their feet, a lump half buried in sand. "Interesting structure," they chirped, reaching toward it with a scanning probe. "Stop," Max shouted. Too late. The lump flared to life with spines, dozens of them, and launched a neurotoxic pulse that made the water shimmer. The Venari screamed and thrashed backward, their suit lighting up with emergency alerts. "Stonefish," Max growled, swimming over. "Worst sting you'll ever survive. If you do survive." The student was quickly pulled back to the platform, and a medical drone injected antivenom through their armor's delivery port. The spines had missed direct contact by millimeters. "Lucky." "Take notes, class," Corax said calmly, recording the whole thing. "This is an excellent example of passive defense adaptation. Look how it uses camouflage and deterrence rather than speed or strength." The rest of the group adjusted their behavior instantly. Everyone floated at least a meter off the seabed for the rest of the dive. As the class moved deeper, the water dimmed and grew cooler. The light filtered through in silvery beams. Coral towers rose like underwater cathedrals, teeming with life and potential death. "Keep your eyes peeled," Max said. "Next target, box jellyfish. Transparent, silent, and loaded with enough venom to stop a human heart in 90 seconds. "I thought jellyfish just floated," Verax muttered. "These don't," Max replied. "These hunt." Corax was delighted. Yes. Chironex fleckery. Their nematocysts fire like microscopic harpoons. A marvel of biological engineering. Max spotted one drifting just ahead, almost invisible in the water. "There's one. Group B. Approach slowly." "Verax, hold position. Your armor might trigger its threat response." The class watched in stunned awe. The jellyfish pulsed gently, its tentacles drifting like silk threads. Then, without warning, it changed direction toward them. "Back up," Max ordered. "Now, slay." A few students panicked and shot upward, breaking protocol. The jellyfish surged slightly, then calmed. It drifted away, bored or unimpressed. Max sighed. "That's the thing about the ocean. You're always reacting, never in control. That's what makes it terrifying." Verax said nothing, but his battle shell's internal fans kicked on. sweat, or fear? Probably both. Back on the platform, the class reassembled for debriefing. Everyone was exhausted. Armor suits hummed softly as they purged toxins, recalibrated filters, and monitored heart rates. Even the gas-based students looked drained. Max stood before them, now holding a small case. "All right," they said. "Final part of today's lesson. Meet Conus geographus. Or as I like to call it, the snail that doesn't need to move fast because it already won." They opened the case to reveal a beautiful shell cream and brown, almost artistic in its pattern. "Looks harmless, right?" Max smiled. "This snail has a venom strong enough to drop a human instantly, no known antivenom. It uses a harpoon-like tooth to inject neurotoxins. The prey doesn't even know it's dead yet." Virax took a half step back. "I've seen it strike," Max continued. "Fastest thing I've ever recorded. Once, a colleague picked one up by accident. The snail tagged his glove, just the glove, and within seconds, his hand went numb. Took hours for the paralysis to wear off. He got lucky, most don't." Corax leaned forward, fascinated. "Is it possible to simulate the strike pattern in the lab?" Max nodded. "I already uploaded footage. I also left a model in the simulation room. You can practice avoiding it if you like stress-induced nausea." The class groaned. Corax clapped once, pleased. "Wonderful session, everyone. Homework. Compare Earth's marine toxin profiles to your homeworld's most venomous species. Write a 3-page reflection on what you'd do differently if you evolved here." As the students dispersed, Max leaned against a console, sipping another coffee. Virax approached slowly. "I've been faking," the Kraken warrior said. "We train our young on volcanic islands, acid winds, predator fields, and," Max asked, "I think Earth might be worse." Max smiled. "You're learning." Virax hesitated. "How many other creatures, like the snail, exist here?" Max looked out over the ocean. "Dozens, maybe hundreds, the ones we know about. Some we haven't even named yet." Virax visibly shivered. "And humans live here." "Yep, swim in it, surf on it, some even study it, like me." Virax shook his head slowly. "You people are terrifying." Max raised their coffee. "We're products of our environment." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the ocean shimmered with gold and blue and quiet, unknowable menace. The class had survived another day, barely, but they'd learned something deeper than any textbook could teach. On Earth, life didn't just fight to survive. It evolved to win.